My go-to method for finishing large items or when I want to make sure I have an excellent finish on a project is HVLP. What exactly is HVLP? It stands for high volume, low pressure. Now, if you went to an auto shop today, you'd probably see them spraying with HVLP as well. That seemed the technology that's taken over the usual spray guns. But you can still use, you could spray finishes out of the typical pressure pot spray gun, gravity feed spray gun. The problem with that is you need to have a big enough air compressor to push that air through, because it's a lower volume, but it's a high pressure, and you need to have enough air behind it to spray what you're doing in that gun. Now I'm talking about sometimes 60, 70 cubic feet per minute on some of these bigger guns, and that's usually beyond your little, DeWalt hot dog nail gun thing. Now my compressor at home, I've got a bigger 60-gallon compressor. It's not so much the power of the compressor, how many horsepower it is, it's the air flow. It's the amount of air it has in its reservoir. So you're going to need something big enough to do that. HVLP is quite a bit different from that. What you're doing here, there's no compressor, there's no compressed air at all. What it is a turbine. And the cheaper ones, you have one turbine, maybe two. This one I've had for quite a while. This is one of the first ones that came out. Now this is the fourth one I've owned, because during the last 25 years I've sprayed probably close to 100 gallons of black paint a year, a black enamel latex or enamel acrylic paint through these guns. And they're not designed for massive production work. These are designed for DIYers, people like us. And I've burned through 3 of these already. This is my 4th one. They're fairly inexpensive. Now, Campbell Houseville came out, they had a dual turbine in this one. That's, if you think of the turbine like a turbine in a car, what it's doing is it's propellers that are forcing air out under very fast speeds. And you can see one of the big differences is this is the hose for it. And you can see it's pretty thick. It's probably 4 times the ID of your basic air hose, because it's got to move a lot of air all at one time, but not at a high pressure. This probably doesn't produce more than 20 psi at any time. So instead of having pressure or air coming out very fast under high pressure, this has a ton of air coming out, but it's very low pressure. And that allows the finish to not quite blow everywhere as you would with a regular pressure gun. I don't know if you guys have ever used a pressure gun like that, but you've got to cover everything in your shop with covers and blankets and everything in your house and your neighbor's house and everything around you, because that paint's going to get everywhere. This is not quite so bad, but don't let them fool you. The overspray on this is still can be an issue. So this one, I was planning on doing this at Rockler, and they've got a very nice Erlex. That's a 3 turbine unit. That's their $600 or $700 unit, which is more of a professional quality. The more turbines, the more air it can move and the less pressure is on the machine itself, so they tend to last longer. But this is what we got here today. This is the gun for it. Now, I like the Campbell Houseful. It looks familiar to most people that have seen a pressure gun. Basically, it's the same thing. You've got, obviously, your trigger, your cup. I've already loaded this up. It's loaded with water and a little red trans tint dye. So we can actually see what it's doing. I'm hoping that's going to work. Okay. If not, everything's going to be red back here. This gun, this is your paint control or your product control. You can turn that all the way in, and your trigger won't move anymore. There's a little needle in here. I can take this apart and show that. Show the parts to it. You can see there's a needle in here, and that's active. That gets moved by the screw thread. Now, the original one I had a much finer screw thread on here, so you could dial it in a little bit better than this one. This has very coarse screw thread, so it's sometimes it's a little harder to get a real fine volume on it. They come with various size needles. The smaller the needle, the thinner the product you shoot with it. I'm not even going to tell you what the sizes are, because honestly, I really don't know. I have a second needle in here, and I've never actually used it. So I don't even know what this is. I've always used the same needle for it. After that, you have a nozzle, which is mated with the needle. You have to have the proper needle with nozzle, and that really just screws right back on here. And you got this guy. This is your spray head. Now this does a couple different things. You see there's a couple different holes in here. What it's doing is the air is coming out of the middle as well as from the top and the bottom of this nozzle. Now if I load it up, yeah, Steve.
Is that called the air cap?
Air cap, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know
I've seen that word. I didn't want to make sure.
this thingy.
Okay.
Okay. So if you mount the air cap like this, these two jets are going to blow the pattern flat. So you'll be painting a fan, but it'll be a horizontal fan. If you set it up so it's like this, it's going to be also painting a fan, except it's going to be a vertical fan. And if you do it on its side, then it's going to be a spot, depending on what you need to do. Now, if you need to cover a lot of area at one time, you could turn it and have a wide fan. Most of the time, I'm usually just using it as a spot spray. So that goes on here.
What would you use the different things? Vertical, horizontal?
I have no idea why you'd want, unless you're painting this way, why you'd fan it horizontally, because then you could do like walls. I painted my shed with this thing, and it took about an hour and a half to do that. It's very quick, but yeah, I probably had the nozzle set up so it was fanning to side. When I'm doing a larger piece of furniture, I'll have the fan set so it's up and down or vertical, and then you can cover a lot of area. It's also easier to keep a wet edge. You need to overlap your spray probably by at least 30% each pass. And if you're on a fan like that, you can easily do that. If you're at in a spot, it's a little harder to do that. What have I sprayed through this thing? Just about everything. I have done, like I said, mostly it's black enamel acrylic paint. I mean, I am not exaggerating, but I've painted probably close to 1,000 gallons of black enamel acrylic paint through guns like this.
Did you have to thin it?
No, not a bit.
No?
Is that why your clothes are black?
Everything is black. What you can do to figure out the viscosity of your material is using a little viscosity cup. And they explain that in the instructions. You put the stuff in here, you let it run down, and then you count it as it drips, how long it takes to drip out. I think that's, once you get used to what you're doing, just by stirring the product you're using, you can usually tell if it's too thick or not. I've got, this is Varathane. This is a semi-gloss clear Varathane. And I brought this in, Bill Atkinson gave me this idea. Take the stuff out of the can immediately, put it in a milk carton or some other kind of a bottle, and then you can pour it where you want it to be and close the top up and you're done. I mean, there's no drips, no fuss, no mess. But anyway, you can see this viscosity is thicker than water, but not quite as thick as pudding that's about the set. So I'm looking at something about the thickness of a heavy cream. That's what I'm looking for. I don't need to thin this stuff at all.
You pass that around?
Yeah,
What is that again?
this is semi-gloss Varathane.
It's
Oh.
water-based?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Doesn't
Ken.
have to thin with just regular paint? I don't know.
It depends on the paint. It says one coat,
Yeah.
and that stuff's like pudding. I mean, literally, you could trowel that on the wall. That's not gonna flow through any gun. And you can only thin this up.
Don't bother trying to open it.
No, don't. You can't thin these out more than 10%. I'm using water base, so if I needed to, I could use 10% water to thin that up. Anything more than that, and you might have a problem with the finish. But most of the time, a decent latex paint, you can spray it and just thin it a little bit. My shed was an opaque water-based stain, and that was pretty thicker than that. And I had to thin it out a little bit, and it flowed just fine. I don't change the needle. Never have. I've always used the same needle in everything. So, what else did I want to talk about? Before we start turning this thing on.
Yeah, if you spray outside, do it when it's calm.
Oh, absolutely, when it's calm. And yes, even though this is water-based, I have a spot in my basement set up. I have some old shower curtains in a corner with a window. I can put a fan in it so it's pulling air out. You do need to use PPE with this. Wear a respirator. You know, it's not worth killing your lungs for something, even though that's water-based. We were also talking about, I think Steve had mentioned something about toning lacquers and just exactly what a toning lacquer is. Basically, it's a lacquer that just has a slight amount of colorant in it. These happen to be instrument or guitar lacquers, but what you can do with these is just fade in a color. Now, when I was spraying this, I had this thing set on its side like this, and I just shot at this angle, just like that. And what I wanted it to do, and I think there's about 3 or 4 coats of lacquer on this right now. And what you got is a much darker color, and this could even go farther, much darker color here, and then it fades out into nothing in the middle. The cherry red, same thing. So by using a toning lacquer or some kind of a toner on it, you can get some interesting effects. You can make this piece of wood, like this is maple, not a very pretty maple either, but once you've used the lacquers on it or the colorant, it kind of blends everything back together again. Now these are a little bit different animal than what we're doing here, but you can do the same thing with this, using a water-based finish with just a little bit of dye in it. This is trans tint, and you can use that, whatever water-based or whatever tinting you want. Doesn't take much, just a few drops, and you're going to go over it a number of times, but eventually you're going to get that fade or that color that you're looking for. I'll hand this around.
If you ever have something you want to really paint dark, like a forest green wicker chair, a little bit of the water base, a little bit of color, and you'll get that deep tone color.
Oh yeah, you can do, I mean, you can build up color very quickly with these guys, as well as this. I've used that Varathane with some of the toners in it
Yeah.
to do the coloring. And you're going to do a number of passes on it. But, I mean, what you're really doing there, I know if you've seen a guitar, especially Les Pauls with the sunburst, where it's one color in the middle and then it changes colors or gets darker toward the edge of that's exactly what they're doing with that. Just doing
is the
coat
toner
after coat.
somewhat of a thinned down version of the solids or transparents, or?
You know, I think this stuff is almost the same thickness as the regular clear coat, but it does have just a slight amount of toner in it, color in it.
So it's basically more lacquer than it is
Yes. So you're really
color.
going to have to use enough of it to get the color you want. Okay. What else do I want to do? Let's, we talked about this. Okay. As far as setting one of these babies up, the only thing you really need to be aware of is they have a filter. And I haven't bothered cleaning this one. I wanted you to see. Now, in my base where I spray, this unit is in another room with a hole just big enough to get that hose through it. And that's it. So it's still pulling enough air through here and to make these dirty. So you have to clean this.
Can I see it?
Yeah. It's white. So you have to clean these after every use. And you can see it even gets through here. Sometimes I'll get my air compressor and I'll just blow this right out too. So that's pretty much, other than washing it, this is pretty much the maintenance of it. Let me get the hose in here. Now this pretty much just hooks right in to the back. It's got a quick connect, hooks right in, that's it. This is actually a pressure pot. This little tube right here picks up air pressure as it's going through the venturi in the nozzle, and it pressurizes this pot. What you don't ever wanna do with an aluminum pot is accidentally drop it on the floor, because you'll dent it, and you'll never get this to seal properly again. Don't ask me how I know that.
You did it.
I just heard about it, okay?
I take it the gun comes along with
The gun comes, this gun comes with this. Now, I don't know if you remember some of the Rockler ones had plastic guns. Most of everything they had was all plastic except for the higher end Hvlp stuff, which was metal. I like the metal. They clean better. Basically, I think they function better and they last longer. Just as an example, this is a cheapo Hvlp. These are fairly comparable units, and they cost about the same. But this is all plastic, every bit of it, except for the nozzle in here and the needle. And I'm not ragging on it, it's a decent enough gun. It'll do the job for you, but it is what it is what you pay for. Okay. I wish I could have found something white to do, but I couldn't, so we're going to just make a mess right here.
anything on the table.
I won't need it, it'll be
You're just-
okay.
You're just gonna put it on the wall, huh?
No, let's just spray it right here,
I know.
it'll be fine. Trust me, it'll be fine. I'm not gonna put out that much.
That's plastic cover for our feet.
Why did Steve come out?
Okay, I'll do it this way then, how about that? Make
All right.
everybody feel better?
Got something behind it, like a
Put it up with the
briefcase?
machine, get a red head.
Got some,
Look at that helmet there.
There we go, all right.
just don't cover the filter part.
You got a hat?
You do it this way. Yeah. You can turn it around.
Yeah. Put the suction on there.
I shouldn't get that much dripping, but it is water, so, all right. So I've got this set up right now, it's gonna blast just a dot on here. And then we'll mess with that, and then we'll go to a different pattern.
And it runs. Oh, here?
Yeah.
What? You can feel it. It's flowing air through there. This is your air. This will cut the inflow all the floor, all the way down. Now, I'm not gonna get any paint through here, any spray, because I got this shut off. There's just a little bit. I'll turn that off again.
Now, you can just see I've just got a little bit there. You can just see a hint. If I was shooting a finish, I'd wait for this to dry. And these tend to dry fairly quickly, some of these finishes. Usually within about 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'd hit it again. And I would keep going until I got the color that I wanted with this. So, let me turn it back on again. Now, you wouldn't get runs like this if you were using a finish. This is because it's water. What I want to do is I'll turn the nozzle or the air cap over. So I get, now my pattern will be a vertical fan. Want to hit that again for me, Steve? I can see it. I was putting out the same amount of material as I was before here, but it barely colored anything now. Because that fan is actually from probably about 8 or 10 inches wide at that point. So you really spread out that color over the whole piece. Now, when you're doing passes on this, again, you want to keep a wet edge. So my first pass, I would go across, and what I don't want to do is what I just did. You want to keep the gun perpendicular to the piece you're painting. And that means you can't do one of these things on it, because what you're doing is you're concentrating the spray in one spot, and it's actually thinning out as you do this. You're getting farther away. You want to keep the spray gun roughly about 1 foot or so away from your piece and keep it perpendicular to it. So you would move yourself back and forth without waving the gun around. That'll get you a very nice finish like that. What else? You need to, again, at my own shop, I have a piece of cardboard behind on the wall where I'm spraying, and not so much as a backdrop. It's so I can test the gun. When I get in there, the last thing you want to do is spray the gun without testing it on the piece you're doing. Because sometimes, it's not going to function properly. You might be shooting out way too much fluid at one time. Yeah.
What if you do it a tabletop?
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
You could spray like this.
Oh.
This is a pressure gun. So it's not like a siphon gun. You can spray directly on top of something. Yeah.
Let's say you have an object with corners and stuff. Do you spray the corners like a door maybe, and spray the door edges before?
Normally I do. If you have some detail work on the piece, like trim or something, yeah, you can do, over, down, and across, and then do the middle part. What you don't want to do is be careful, because you can actually then double coat those edges you just did. Depending on what you're really doing. If I had something with like a cabinet door, typically I don't paint, even if it's a tall door, I typically don't go side to side on a door. I will go up and down. And for me, for some reason, that seems to help getting in all those corners of the moldings. And for me, it's easier to do that way. Of course, most of the time on a cabinet door, you're spraying the thing before you assemble it and down on the ground or on the table. Yeah. So you're actually doing it. You're doing the door panel first, and then you do the rest of it when you assemble it. What else have I missed?
I find when I'm doing chairs and things like that, I do it upside down first,
Okay, yeah.
then flip it around.
Oh, sure, you do the stuff you can't get to
Yeah.
when it's sitting there, because yes, once you've got the finish on the top of it, like a chair, you don't want to go grab it around to turn it upside down again.
Yeah,
Um,
a rotating table.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, most of what I've been doing lately, of course, is instruments, and those I have hanging off a hook from the ceiling, and I can just rotate the hook as I'm going through doing my finish work on it. And you can put on, the interesting thing about this is running through the turbine actually heats the air in the gun. So it's coming out warm. And that helps actually start to finish to cure right off the bat. And if you're in a big hurry, you can actually just get the gun running and just, let the air flow over the finish to dry it, because it is warm and it's clean, it's been filtered. Yes, Steve?
Does the warm air analyze it better?
I think it's just a result of how the machine works, basically.
I always turn my machine on 4 or 5 minutes before I spray.
Just to get it heated up.
You get
Yeah.
it heated up, yeah.
If you're spraying in a cold environment, I'll put the gun, I'll put the fluid or material in the gun, I'll set it in a sink with warm water to heat up the whole thing. So that material is gonna flow better when it's warm than when it's cold, especially if you're finishing in a basement or a garage. So you can do things where it's cold out, but you gotta make sure this flows better.
I always store all my water-based material 3 feet off the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Don't leave it on the concrete.
No, because it'll just chill it out.
Yeah.
You can, what I was talking about before, you didn't hear me because this thing was running. They all have air pressure controllers, and that's this little guy right here. This is full bore, this is taking all the air through it that it's gonna give. But you can turn it up, and that's gonna restrict probably about 80% of the airflow. And what that allows you to do is get a little more control. You can do some interesting effects with that. Speckling, for one.
You gotta
Because-
turn it down.
Yeah, you have to turn that way down, but your air has to be low. So it's actually just kind of spitting the paint out at that point. I rarely, don't think I've ever done that, but there's things, that's the stuff you can do with this gun. Yeah,
So you got what, 2 controls on the gun? You got
Yes.
the air
airflow
flow
and the material flow,
material.
yes. And they're all the same with that. Each one will have some form of control on it.
So if it's something new, you gotta figure out what's the best airflow. what's the best
Exactly.
material.
So if I'm using a new material that I haven't used before, I'll put it in the gun and I'll get a piece of cardboard and I'll go at it and I'll see how it's gonna act. So I know what it's gonna do before I put it on the piece that I'm working on. That's saved my butt a couple of times. Because sometimes things just don't wanna flow, or they flow too well, and then you get just all over the place, and you don't want that.
Do they make different size guns, or is everything?
Pretty much it's a standard gun.
They don't have detail guns or.
Well,
air
not so much
pressure?
with HVLP, but you can do, I've seen now they have the siphon
Yes.
gun on it now,
Gravity fed.
gravity fed, yeah, right, it's not a siphon, this is a siphon gun.
You
Uh,
can
the
get
gravity-
different, you can get different tips though for the.
Absolutely, you can get different tips depending on your material. If it's very thin material, you need a smaller needle. If it's very heavy material, you can use a larger needle. Or you can just thin it down. I think I've got like the middle of the road needle here, so I'll thin stuff down. Problem with thinning, another thing with thinning it, if it's a high gloss, if you thin it, it's no longer gonna be a high gloss anymore. It's going to cut that gloss down quite a bit. So you need to be aware of that too.
10%'s the maximum.
10%, yes. Anything more than that and you're just,
Colored water.
it won't dry as nice. You might get some orange peel. things like that. But with using any spray gun like this, you always, you want to know what it's going to do with the material you're using it with.
The alligator finishes or
I've not had that trouble.
rough finish?
The only time I've ever had that problem is it was very hot day, and the finish dried too fast. There
Is
was
there-
low
is there-
humidity.
Is there a retarder?
No, not that I'm aware of for this stuff, but for a hot temperature and low humidity.
Put it in ice.
Well, that you could maybe do that, or just find a place that you can paint that's not as warm
Not so hot.
or as dry. Because the finish will actually, they have a lot of trouble with these in the Southwest, because, especially using lacquers or shellacs, because the finish will dry before it hits the piece it's on, and it literally just bounces off. So, water-based, we usually don't have that issue. Okay, yeah, Steve.
I've read that some guys take their finished material, like polyurethane, and they'll thin it up by 50%.
Yeah. I can't speak to that. I've never tried that, but it's just a matter of fooling with it.
It works for Christmas trees,
Christmas trees?
50% latex, and you've got colored Christmas trees.
So if you're painting a Christmas tree, you want to thin that sucker out by 50%.
You're talking about real Christmas trees?
Oh, yeah.
Real ones, yeah, they're a little brown.
Yep, just spray it green. You're
Sounds
good.
like Soldier Field when we played a football game down there and they dyed the field.
Oh, yeah. Mark?
Would there be any use in, for that gun in spraying, epoxies?
I wouldn't. Not at all. I think you can, yeah, that would be a problem. Even using like oil-based finishes aren't too bad, but if you're talking about shellacs or lacquers, you've got to make sure you're ready when you're done. You got to get that gun in the solvent immediately, because if it dries, if it cures in it, you've lost it. You'll never get that clean again. That's one of the reasons too I always like to use water-based with these, because they don't dry as quickly. Yeah.
The hose, that's just air going through, so you
That's
don't
just
have to
air.
worry about cleaning the
No,
inside.
well, you can, yeah, even the outside, you're good.
How,
So, yeah.
how do you go about cleaning that thing?
Well, you just pretty much take it apart.
Same thing you did in the
Same thing
beginning.
I did. You take off the air cap, the nozzle, and actually the needle comes off. You can take this guy out, and there's a spring in there that you want to be aware of, because, you could easily lose that. And the needle will come right out, usually. Needle comes out, and you run, I soak these. I'll have a bucket of soapy water, warm water. I'll run water through it until it comes out clear. Get yourself a little bottle brush, because inside here, you've got a siphon tube, and that needs to get cleaned out. There's also this little gasket here, which actually is a breathing. That's where the pressure goes through. You have to make sure there's usually a little tiny hole there. You make sure that's clean, or it won't pressurize the pot.
I had the opportunity to talk to a guy who was a paint salesman at Ward's. You know what that is, Ward's full-time stores?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said basically latex paint is just a form of glue.
I could see that, yeah.
It's glue.
Now, I've shot latex through here. I've had to thin it down, and I just use water. I don't get Floetrol or any other of the products that you can
Sell it to
buy.
you.
So I'm just running through water, and sometimes that's a hit or a miss. It depends on the paint. That's why you always test it. I've come through painting stuff and it comes out in a stream or globs. And actually there's a technical term for that. It's called snotters. So you don't want to spray things with your snotters. You want a nice even spray. No, that's actually a real term. Paint people, yeah.
I looked at some HVLP guns, and I've seen a few of them say, do not use latex paint.
It's probably because the needle's not big enough,
No,
or they don't sell a needle for it.
you
big
can
enough.
use.
But you can shoot latex through it.
It said,
It's all in the thickness.
big bold letters, do not use with
Well,
latex
because
paint.
what's gonna happen is the person's gonna buy that gun, put latex in it, not know what the hell they're doing, and it's not gonna work, and they're gonna call the company and complain about it, or give them a bad review.
It's amazing they can even sell them that way.
Yeah,
Because,
a
oil
lot of
paint,
people are buying these to use latex paint.
go to Home
through it.
Depot and try to buy oil paint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a problem with the gun itself. Now, you can get HVLP guns that work on an air compressor as well. But you had to make sure your air compressor has enough volume of air to operate the gun properly. Just like a regular spray gun. When you have the whole unit together, then you don't have to worry about that. It's all designed to work at one thing.
What would be the difference between this and then a triple turbine, high-priced one? What are you buying that makes it so good?
I think it's just the volume of air.
So you're spraying bigger objects?
Or, yeah, I don't really get it because I've used a 3-turbine compressor or a sprayer and this one, and in my mind, they both do the same thing. Sometimes they tend to be a little quieter than this one. I think this one's noisy because it's cheap, let's face it. The first one I bought was like $99, and that goes back almost 30 years ago.
What says, Bill, how many Harbor Freight sprayers do you have? None? What do you use?
I don't even know the name of it, but it was about $800.
Well, it's a pretty decent gun then. Yeah,
For spraying cars?
yeah, it's not,
$100.
Eight.
$1,800?
800.
Oh, 18?
800,
Eight.
800, 800.
Not unusual
Yeah.
for a
I've
good
been reading
sprayer.
about Hvlp now.
That, low volume, low pressure,
Yeah, that seems to be an upcoming thing now.
I don't know, I've never even seen one,
Yeah.
anything like it.
You know what's fun? You get yourself what call a pattern gun, and you thin down plaster and lime mixed.
Okay,
Throw
well,
some
that's
sand in it, and you can blow moonscapes and
different creatures.
glitter, but it's still spraying.
But I'm reading, that's, might not be a bad gun for people with smaller compressors that don't have a 30 or 40 or 50 gallon.
If it's possible, this thing, Mark, retails right now for $200, I think. So you can get the whole thing ready to go out the door for about $200, $250, or get yourself a step up to the Erlex, which is like $300 or $400, and you're done. You don't need an air compressor. You don't need anything else. In my mind, for me, that works. And I have an air
Do
compressor.
you know the difference between an electric, like Wagner sprayer?
Those are different. They don't use air.
I know that, yeah.
They kind of just force it out.
Yeah, and you need to be pretty strong. You
Yeah.
try doing that for 8 hours.
Yeah, it's
You get that on the ground.
so they're a little bit different. Those sprayers.
It's like hanging
And
on
they're
to a
cleaning
vibrator.
them out is a pain in the tuchus too,
Yeah.
because you got paint all through that thing. So
Yeah, but I've used one like that, and it has a hole a little bit bigger than this one, and so it's got to be with a lot of air. But I can carry it around with me on a shoulder thing, and
Yeah.
I painted my whole garage with
Yeah.
that.
yeah, so
But it's like a Wagner, I think, something like that.
well, if it's
So I know
blowing
it's
air, it's an HVLP. The Wagners that you see that you stick the hose in the can of paint and you plug it in, those don't spray with air. Those spray, that's just pressure. It forces the paint out through a spray nozzle. So they're a little bit different, but, and they're designed to do latex paint. basically.
All these sprayers are more with the person who's pulling the gun.
Well, it takes, like anything,
Yeah.
it takes
It's
practice.
a learning.
There's a learning curve. Now, the first one, if you get one, or if you wanna use one,
That and the quality of what you're spraying.
exactly. Get a good finish.
What would you recommend as water-based paints?
I like, well, I don't do a lot of paint, but
Or whatever?
I like, if I'm gonna do a color, it'll be like a acrylic enamel. There's an excellent paint to shoot through these. It's expensive, but you can usually pick those up. You're gonna need to go to a paint store, like Sherwin-Williams. But if it's something worth doing, it's worth doing right. For clear coats, I like Varathane at Menards. I don't usually use general finishes through the paint guns. I'll buy Varathane. It's a quarter the price, and it does an excellent job.
You can color it.
Yeah,
You can have a
just
forest
using the
green.
same dyes. I've done that before.
But it's water-based.
It's water-based, yeah, it's water-based. The reason I brought this thing in is I'd like to let someone else take this home with them tonight. So it's got easy to follow instructions. It's got everything in it. It's got the paint cup. It's got an extra needle. I think this belongs to it. It was in the box. If you'd like to have this and mess around with it, it's gonna require a donation to the club. But other than that, it's up for grabs. All right, any other questions?
Who makes that one?
This is Erlex.
Oh, it's an Erlen.
Yeah, this is their base hobbyist model. I wouldn't suggest you want to do, experiment with it, you know, I don't know, I've never actually used it. Erlex is excellent name for these, so it should be okay. And like I said, for a donation to the club, it could be yours. Anyone else? Yeah,
Could you repeat that,
what, the whole thing?
what you said? I missed the start.
Oh. Hey, who said you didn't miss much? Who said that?